vast amusement.
Hello and welcome to Plow and Potato. I'm Sean Bonet. This is Joffrey Schwait. We are high above Moscow, coming to you live from Moscow here in the Spud Pub.
I refuse to say welcome to the big show until you say my name correctly.
Well, I said Schwait.
Hi, I'm Joffrey Swait. Welcome to the big show.
You know what? It's been a while.
It has
I'm
been
a little rusty.
too long.
I need to get oiled up. We're not ready to jump. Oh, I said your name right. What do you think I said?
You said Joffrey Swait.
Okay, it's like it's like when you throw a football to somebody and they kind of fumble it in the air, but then they bring it down.
I missed you. Hey, it's good to be back, boys and girls.
Hey, it is. So today, not only are we going to talk about how we've missed each other and missed you, but we're going to talk about how we talk about prayer. Just
Right.
coming right back in the saddle, jumping in, ride that pony. Rest in peace, Lil Nas X. You know what I mean?
I don't know everything you mean, but I'm okay with it.
Okay.
So an example of how we talk about prayer would be like the promises we make in conversation when we say, "I'll pray for you."
Yeah.
So we're just gonna talk about prayer and prayer culture.
And you might be asking, Plow and Potato, back at it after a little hiatus. Why are we starting here? Well, we live in crazy times, and not just worldwide, but locally. There's always some kind of grievance to bear. There's always some way where you have to just really lean into your community because of something hard going on. Well, anytime something hard happens, the cornerstone of the centerpiece, something that's always going to be in the mix, is prayer. People requesting prayer, people making promises about prayer, people actually praying. And so we thought, what a great encouragement
Yes.
this conversation could be in these times that are unstable.
And we're going to have, unstable. I mean, people are always suffering in stable and unstable times. But yeah, it's we are going to, I think, we're going to treat pretty lightheartedly and have some fun with this conversation. But in the background, as with all of our fun, is a great tragic element, right?
Wow.
Which is that people suffer and
Yeah.
people crave prayer, and we ought to pray for each other.
And just even in the conversation about how we talk about prayer, one thing that will be helpful is to remember that very idea that you just said. Life is going to be a constant, you're always getting a dose of the happy and the sad. You're always getting something that's light and something that's heavy. No matter who you are or where you are, either you yourself, someone in your family, or someone you know
Yes.
has great reason to rejoice, and they also have great reason to grieve.
I mean, this is a bit of an aside, but many great theologians and writers have pointed out that the cosmos and the story of the cosmos is a comedy.
Yeah.
And that's the case because it has a happy ending, right? So if we just go with the comedy tragedy dichotomy, then the universe, this story is a happy story, and it is a happy story, but it's a happy story in which souls are lost to eternal perdition, in which there is gnashing of teeth, in which there is cancer and stubbed toes, and and we can have a laugh, and it is ultimately not only satisfying but fun and funny. We believe that,
Right.
but we also know that the suffering is real.
And often we talk about how the joy of the Lord is our strength, and how we fight wickedness going on or heavy burdens around us through festival and through laughter and joy and great fellowship.
Right.
And that's a centerpiece, but along the way there is prayer where we're doing both of those dichotomies at once, where we're giving thanks and making our requests known to God. So often when we're talking about prayer to other people in times of hardship, someone will say, "Would you pray for me?" or "Pray for this," or "I'm starving and craving, desiring your prayers." And we might say, "I'll pray for you,"
Right.
or "I'll be praying."
Or I'm praying for you. Or the classic Facebook comment, praying.
Praying emoji with the hand.
Right. Praying.
And so I just thought, let's just do a little grammatical parsing, Mr. Man of words. Let's take this verb, pray. So when someone says praying, let's just start there. What does that mean? Like, what if the people, what does it actually mean on its face? And what do you think a lot of people mean when they say that?
Well, I mean, there's, it's present progressive, but, we end up, so we'll say not only praying, but I am praying, or I'll be praying, right? We use other tenses too, right? Like we'll pray for you, but there's this continuous action in most of these promises. And I think when someone posts praying, they usually are praying in that moment, but I'll be praying in particular.
I will be.
Right, exactly. I think that we need to be careful about speaking lightly of prayer.
Okay.
Not that it should be too heavy of a thing, but rather that how many times have you told someone I'll be praying and then just straight up forgotten?
Yeah, or like, and it's always kind of disheartening and also funny at the same time how silly we are with our words.
Yep.
Because we'll say, "Oh, praying for your brother," and you didn't pray in that moment, and then you just forget later.
No, yeah, and that's as bad as the thoughts and prayers memes make it out to be.
Right.
You
yeah.
know?
And all these secularists who, I mean, it's really fascinating. The first time I, cracked into the world of secular humor against Christianity, and a repeating theme is this idea of we'll be praying, or thoughts and prayers, and how they take that as a joke. Often, I don't know what kind of insight they have into this, but like no one actually does it. But I think more than that, they think it doesn't actually do anything.
Right, of course.
It's like,
right.
That's just something to say and to get you off the hook from actually.
And honestly, I think the phrase thoughts and prayers reveals that, because Christians don't say thoughts and prayers, right? Thoughts and prayers is the thing that, TV announcers can say to include everybody, right? If you're from California, it'll just be thoughts. If you're from Alabama, it'll be prayers,
And then somewhere in Texas, the two mingle for Fox News.
Exactly, yes. But, there is, I think that, when we say I'll be praying, we're kind of running down that direction.
Yeah, and I've been trying to be cautious of that use, because it can be used in a variety of ways. You can say praying, like as in, I'm praying right now.
Right. Well,
and that's the extent of what I mean. And maybe I'm not saying for the next year I'm going to be praying constantly, daily, weekly, anytime I think of you. But I try to lean more to the I will pray, or prayed for you.
Right.
Something that has sort of a
concrete,
and it has sort of a singular. This one time I intercede for you.
It's perfect, not continuous.
That's right. That's right.
So,
grammatically speaking,
this is going to become relevant quickly, but I think it's worth pointing out to our audience that you recently said "I love you" to me for the first time.
When?
Like last week.
What?
Yeah, you said "I love you."
Oh.
Yeah, it was tender. I said "I love you" back.
You did. That was the first time?
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've always thought I've been saying.
You've always loved me. I know that.
I thought I've always said it too.
But
I feel like this is like a dad situation. Like, Dad, this is the first time you said I loved you. And it's like, son, I've always loved you.
Anyway.
So fathers, tell your kids you love your friends.
Woo.
I love you, Joffrey.
I love you.
Okay.
And there's another friend. So my best
You've got
man.
many friends.
I have friends, so many
You've got
friends. And I've said I love you to a lot of guys. I'll be
Yeah.
honest. But there are some special, there's an I love you that doesn't need the I love you man, right? That diffuser, right? In the 90s, you say I love you man. We say man, it's like, so it's not gay. Exactly.
Like, bro, I love you, bro.
Right.
Love you, bro. And then you don't even say I, just love you.
Yeah.
Love you, bro.
Right, exactly.
And then yeah instead of you. Just ways you can,
So my best man, Robert Privet, who does not watch this podcast, we've known each other for years, and when we say goodbye to each other, we say, I love you. And I love that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I love you.
Yep.
There's no butchering.
I love you. I love you too. Yeah. Anyway, this guy means a lot to me. But so one of the ways he changed my life, this is years ago, we were talking about this very subject, and I was sort of expressing my frustration. He's a Southern Baptist, for which, of course, I forgive him. But I met my wife at the Baptist Student Union. I was definitely in a Southern Baptist milieu for a while there, I wasn't a Southern Baptist myself,
You're
but I
just
was
trying
in
to
that
find the girls and
environment.
the friends. They just
Exactly.
produce the best people.
Exactly right. So, so we're talking about this subject, and I said I expressed my frustration with how flippantly people promised to pray.
Okay.
And
Classic.
what Robert told me he did, which I now do, is he said that the moment I tell someone I will pray for them, I pray for them.
Yep.
You know, out loud or not. Like if I say it, I do it.
Right
Then. And that's what I do now too, because of Robert Purvett. And that is a behavior I encourage in all of you all.
Yeah. It's funny, speaking of Baptists, I have a really good friend of mine, Glenn Eric Kaiser. He probably doesn't watch.
You
this
probably don't
podcast.
say I love you to him.
I do. In fact, I feel like you guys in a room together would be an interesting dynamic because he's very gregarious like you are. But he had that same approach. He's kind of a person who really wants to be meaningful and genuine in his interactions, and how that translates in the area of prayer is if you're going to pray, you just do it right there. Or we ask, like, well, can I pray now? Or like, I'll be praying, can I pray for you now?
Yeah.
And it even takes it to a more forward level than what you were describing, because you attempt to, in the moment, wherever it's at,
Yes.
make the prayer happen.
You know, and I've had moments when I've said, can I pray for you now? But mostly I see other people do it. And I'll tell you what, it makes me uncomfortable.
When they don't ask, or when they ask?
When they ask, it makes me uncomfortable because
you feel like
I'm not
feel
Pentecostal for a reason.
Yeah.
You know,
You feel bad.
I'm wrong to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But so this actually brings up to me how we were talking about language and how what tense do we choose? You know, like I am praying, or I prayed for you. I write all these, but you know, our language, English, has been sanitized, scrubbed of God.
Okay.
And
unless you're cursing him.
Unless you're cursing him, that's right. And it was scrubbed of God in part by Christians for that very reason. Christians who 200 years ago didn't want to take the Lord's name in vain. You know, we don't say, as talk on the street, things like "Go with God," "God be with you," "Lord help me."
Or we might say Godspeed, but it's all jokingly.
Right.
It kind of comes uncomfortable if you give someone a benediction like that.
Yes, exactly. And totally distracting from your point. The God in Godspeed actually is from good. Just so you know.
Okay.
But yes, benedictions are lacking. And conversation with God is lacking. And a lot of the motivation for this, honestly, I think was, we don't want to take the Lord's name in vain. We don't want to take his name lightly. But what does lightly mean? Mm-hmm. Because if God is with us, if the Holy Spirit indwells me, when I get a little cut on my thumb whilst cutting onions, can I say Jesus?
Like as prayer or
well, that's the question, right? But like we always interpret that negatively.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, like Lord help me is not even a phrase in English anymore. Who says God help me?
Yeah.
Nobody says that. And so then when we're talking about prayer, we feel uncomfortable with any talk like that. Yeah. And we credit it to wild Pentecostals.
Yep.
And that's it. So nobody wants to say, can I pray for you now? Or nobody wants to say, Lord help us, Lord have mercy. No one says that.
Christ have mercy.
Yeah. Like right now, let's just say, Lord have mercy. It makes us cringe.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's an interesting observation you've made as you talked. It's a scrubbing of the language, but it also is a way to identify yourself with a denomination you probably don't want to be associated with, whether it be some sort of charismatic name it and claim it group, because when you speak like that, it has this strange artificial feeling to it where the power in the prayer or the Lord's name is in the words themselves. Right. It's like if I say these words and work.
But part of the artificiality, that is definitely part of Pentecostalism, is the magic chants. Right. But you know, part of the artificiality we also feel is we're doing things that are outside of our comfort zone, and anytime you do that, it feels awkward. The first time you try to hit a baseball feels unnatural. It is unnatural. The first time you try to give a speech, it feels unnatural. And so these behaviors in prayer and these ways of speaking, we've made them feel unnatural.
That's
right? We feel creepy saying "God be with you" to someone in church.
Yeah.
And that should not be.
And it's like that with other phrases in the same regard. We were talking beforehand. The first time I heard someone say "Happy Lord's Day," or enjoy the Sabbath, or enjoy the Lord's rest, or something that you would say on.
It felt weird and fake.
Yeah, it's like, and it's because the culture of the language just wasn't present there, and so to bring it up, it's like, it's the uncomfortable feeling. But now I do it all the time.
Yep. Because you embraced it.
I embraced it, and you should embrace it because it's good. It's good to say these things and kind of bring revival, and not just revival in that sense, but emphasis on what's good to say to people.
Yep.
These are good words to say to people. Well, and you talked about how, if English has experience of scrubbing, Brazilian kind of has an opposite, right? It's kind of
right.
God is more built into the language.
Yeah, which people might the same way Yankees like to say that Southern politeness is fake. But when
fake
you
because they just do it
because exactly,
it's like scratching
they're polite
your nose.
to everybody, right? But the fact is, if you live there, you realize, oh wow, there's something to this. Of course, there is fakeness here and there, but there's more real politeness. And the same thing happens in cultures where the language has more of God built into it, where people can just say things like "go with God" and not really be thinking of Yahweh. But the fact is, Brazilian culture, God does often feel more present, and the language is a part of that loop where it reflects it and it feeds it. So really, I mean, to make the point succinctly, if God is with us and you're talking to someone about praying for them, God is right there, right in that moment, and act like it, and talk like it, but push through the discomfort. It may feel fake, but you're the problem.
That's right. And I think part of the problem that the topic of the show is how we talk about prayer. Part of the issues that stem from how we talk about it, whether it be poorly or not confidently or sheepishly, is because of how we do prayer. Typically that's the one thing that Christians struggle with the most, next to reading their Bible, right? Is they don't pray frequently and in a disciplined and whole manner. And so it's kind of like the classic thing where genuineness kind of becomes this prize goal. And so if you don't do it, you don't have the right to say you do or call on it from others.
Right.
And so that's how you get caught up in different sins, but that's also how you don't progress in your sanctification. You feel like, well, maybe if I get a really good prayer life going for a month, then I can, speak more confidently about all this.
You're just creating barriers for yourself in that moment, I think that's one of the reasons that having set prayers and memorized prayers can be helpful. I love the Book of Common Prayer. But more than that, like this,
like I just love you.
Yeah, just slide it in there. 1928, baby.
But this isn't the first time, Mark. You real fans, this has come up in another episode. Continue on.
But my main point here is actually, we've talked about poetry, we've talked about words, and how important it is to be a master of words. This is such an instance. When we run into someone on the street, they tell us they have some great disaster looming over them. Part of the discomfort of telling them we're going to pray, in fact, we're going to pray for them right now, is I remember when I was a kid in these evangelical circles, and they had all these silly prayers. I can't pray that way anymore. I can't say Father God 17 times in 1 minute anymore. Like, I can't do that. I don't have that language anymore, which means I have no language for public spontaneous prayer. False. You are a poet. You know how to speak. You've worked at being a master of words. Compose a prayer right then. Be as formal as you wish. Have the skill with words and embrace it.
And one thing that's helped me, when I pray, I typically pray through scriptures, and I use the Proverbs. So I turn on the Proverbs, And as they come, this is the motivation.
Hold on a second. You turn on the Proverbs?
I turn on the Proverbs.
Wait. Oh, like audio.
No, like a faucet.
Like a faucet. Yes, I was hoping that's what you meant. So deep in your gut is a reservoir of Proverbs. I love that, dude.
I wish. No, it's the audio. But it becomes deep in my pit because it's amazing as you pray in that way. I think people overlook the book of Proverbs as such a great place to, a great inspiration for prayers. Like these wisdom things, it's so like, okay, here's a proverb. Well, pray that proverb, that sense of wisdom and right direction over somebody. And as I've done that more and more, not only do the Proverbs are they more saturated within my being, but also I'm more equipped for the spontaneous prayer.
Mm-hmm.
It's the discipline and the writing out the scripting that comes from the formal liturgy, from receiving the word that prepares you for the spontaneity.
Yes, absolutely. That's
so
right.
Preparing, in the summer, it's getting all the materials before you go out and build, because, just like many preachers have preached about, it's you don't prepare for a disaster or a calamity when it happens. That's not the time to get things right. You want to be ready for that.
Yep.
And if you want to be ready to talk about prayer, to pray for other people, because people want you to pray for them. I was thinking it's a really comforting thing. If you're going through a trial.
It is so comforting.
Yeah, if you're going through a trial and a small group or a big group, depending on what it is and who knows and who's involved, just to think, families upon families are praying for me this night or sometime this day.
Yeah.
And so if your promise, how you talk about prayer, is really sure, and us as Christians can become more reliant on what we say, just to think like, the Swaits are praying for me today. Like Kimberly said, and I believe her, and then, or like, all these other families, they're praying.
Yes, and that's absolutely crucial, but that makes me want to add, like, praying for someone presentially, like being there, putting your hand on their shoulder, holding their hand, and praying for them in that moment. So prayer is effective. Beyond that, prayer is also consoling and comforting. And so, regardless of how the prayer has been answered, I have been comforted in that moment when people have prayed, have stopped me where I was and prayed for me. I have been encouraged and made glad and made stronger by that. That's not the main reason we pray, but it's an important reason for praying. And that's a reason to pray right here and now.
Yeah. And we need to soften our hearts more in the receiving of prayer. I find this especially when you're praying in public, and this is kind of the awkwardness coming in, is you don't really want to be in the moment and in the prayer and think about what's going on by the words being said or who they're being directed to or what the answers can be. You sort of are like, you've got your eyes closed, but your mind's eye is open and thinking, is someone looking at me? What are they thinking?
Yes.
Or like, what is that person even if your prayer group.
And we're not acting like God is there.
Right. And so we're just really closing our eyes, hopefully not causing a scene by our prayer. And I just think we need to be more open to talking about prayer and more open to making that prayer that public thing you're not ashamed of. Like, oh, good, I'm glad they saw us praying. We're Christians. They need to be Christians too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of extends. So as we take this, how does this come home? Like, what does someone go away? What do they build and what do they defend with these ideas?
Well, I think that we ought to be thinking about composing prayers on the fly. And, I think that, so much of what we've said today is not really relevant to people who like post on Facebook, say. But we can make it relevant. Like, if you would stop, if I told you on the street that I had some trouble and you prayed for me right then and there, maybe your comment on Facebook isn't praying, or we prayed for you on Saturday.
Yeah.
Maybe your comment is a prayer in itself.
There you go.
Maybe you actually, maybe it's a prayer that maybe it's a prayer that you write right then. Yeah. But, if we can talk to each other on Facebook, hey, Susie, how are you? I am well. Then we can pray for each other
Yeah.
on Facebook.
And most of the time, I mean, how many times does someone do that? And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to see how they.
Well, I think sometimes people think it's cheesy, just like praying out on the sidewalk.
Yep.
Embrace it. Embrace the cheese. Don't be too embarrassed to pray for someone on Facebook or on the sidewalk.
Squeeze it out, baby.
Yeah, baby.
Squeeze that cheese. It's all about the whiz.
Come on, dude.
So the takeaway, I would say,
The takeaway is that when you think of cheese, you think of tube cheese. That's a horrible takeaway.
no, you're saying something about. Yeah, I guess I did think of that immediately.
Yeah, you did.
But
I was thinking of a fine Roquefort.
No, you weren't. You
No,
monster.
I wasn't. But I wasn't thinking of Cheese Whiz.
I'm a man of many cheeses. I have
Okay.
a very broad palate, a
Mm.
very mature palate. I love many cheeses. I even like blue cheese.
Ooh, Velveeta. Ooh, Velveeta.
And
Cheese,
I'm not
cheese.
I'm not offended by Velveeta or plastic craft. So the takeaway should be just think about the way that you use the verb form prayer. Think about what you're communicating and what you're actually doing when you talk about praying for other people. Embrace the cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace the cheese of prayer. And just make it more public. Make it something that you actually believe in and do more often, because it'll become more comfortable, more natural. You get more reps in, and it'll feel just as fine as walking around town.
Amen, brother.
All right.
God be with us. God be with you.
us. Lord have mercy. Christ have mercy. Lord have mercy. So, keep your trowel in. No, you say that. Dang it.
Keep your trowel in hand.
And keep your gun rather. No, do I say that?
I
do.
thought well, yeah. Keep your trowel in hand.
And I say keep your gun rather loose in the holster.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
No,
been
I
a
say
long time.
keep your trowel in hand.
Keep your gun rather